Hello, and welcome to Real Cheating Story. I took one last serious look around the house to see if there was anything I wanted or had missed. It became quickly apparent to me that I had not. What I normally took with me on these last-minute unexpected business trips had been removed, just like they would normally be. I had told my wife of 25 years that I would once again park my company car at the airport, just like I always had in the past. In truth, it was still at the office, along with every other item that belonged to me. At the age of 45, after 25 years in management, I had just taken early retirement for 3/4 of the level that I would get if I stayed on for another 5 years, having fully capitalized on my share options. Every year on the next market day, I would receive substantial performance bonuses. Instead of taking the cash, I had mine deposited directly into my retirement account, so it was never part of my income. The bonuses were never taxed, and the full amount went into my retirement. Over the years, that little strategy had served me well. As a result, my monthly retirement check would be much more than I currently brought home. My focus on directing my retirement fund investments in tech had paid off quite well, and my retirement was now set up for direct payment into my new account. I had set up this new account at the local branch of Bank of America for where I was moving to on Friday. I had deposited my last paycheck into it, which was substantial because it included my accrued vacation pay. I held the check in hand for the shares I had sold. $850,000 net after prepaying taxes was a nice nest egg for anyone. The company was thrilled to facilitate it because they could promote someone into my former position for half the pay. I could not afford to deposit that check in the bank until after the end of the day, just in case it was discovered. This way, it could not be claimed as part of the marital assets. Those expensive suits I always had to wear, all except for one, were now at Goodwill, along with everything else I no longer needed or wanted. I was downsizing my life in a significant way. What I considered personal items or keepsakes I had packed and loaded, and with the difference in tax rate from California to where I was going to end up way ahead. I also knew the cost of living standards were much lower. The small U-Haul truck I had rented for a one-way trip had been leased through my parents' family trust in my mother's brother Uncle John's name. It was loosely loaded with all the things I was bringing with me, and he had arranged it from his end. I paid the fees in cash to ensure there was nothing here that could be associated with my name. I was leaving the West Coast and going back to my roots in a small town in the middle of nowhere, as my wife would put it. I no longer had to live with the job I had grown to hate over time, thanks to my wife, who had made it clear by her recent behavior that my obligation to her was done. I was looking forward to a simple life once again, where your next-door neighbor was a mile or two away, and not just 200 yards across the street. I knew full well that my wife had forgotten that I still owned the farm my parents had left for me. She had hated the place so much that she wouldn't even go back for my family's funeral. A car accident had taken them away far too early. As she put it, people like her wouldn't be caught in an uncivilized place like that. It had been that very thought of hers that convinced me that what I was doing was the right thing. Yeah, I had married a stuck-up, self-centered person who always believed she was better than anyone else. I thought I had tamed her ways as our 3 daughters were growing up, but sadly, I learned the hard way in the last few months that I had not. It had me wondering if I ever truly knew Kendra. Had I, like so many men who came into her life, bought the illusion she created for herself? Did she really know who she was? It was now obvious that I never had. Thanks to Kendra's own conduct, I had woken up and seen the reality of our relationship in a new light. As a result, I began putting things in order. My desires, wants, and future had changed. Surprisingly, I was filled for the most part with a feeling of contentment I had not felt in a long time. My freedom from the bondage that my life had become would come at a significant cost to a lot of people. I had left the family estate in my parents' names and had never closed out the family's trust after their death 5 years ago. I don't know why I hadn't done that, but considering what was starting to happen, it was now a major blessing. It could not be considered a marital asset since I had never accepted ownership. The only thing I had done with the farm was rent out the 10 quarter sections of land to some of the local farmers who deposited their rent checks directly into the family trust account. I had left it untouched deliberately, as it was building a nice emergency fund for when needed. With my knowledge, I could make a living repairing the tractors and heavy equipment instead of supervising the designing and building of them. A family relative was working on getting my parents' old homestead ready, I could stay with him until it was ready for living in again if I had to, so I was not worried about anything. I had called Kendra, my wife, to remind her that I would be leaving on my business trip before she arrived home from hers. I also wanted to verify that she had not changed her airplane schedule. She said she was looking forward to being home after 2 weeks of being forced to live out of a suitcase. I had planned everything down to the minute. My 3 daughters and their husbands would be arriving 2 hours before her arrival home to throw the surprise birthday party we had conspired together to get done. One of my daughters had even invited her mother's boss and his spouse. All it took was me dropping the hint. His wife had said they would gladly come because her husband was always bragging about her accomplishments. This would give her a face to the lady she had heard so much about. None of my daughters knew how big of a surprise it really was going to be. Over 50 family members and friends were looking forward to coming for the potluck supper to help celebrate my wife's belated birthday. We were celebrating it late because her birthday had fallen while she was away with the rest of the management team she had been sent with. It was just one of those important things she could not get out of, as Kendra had explained to us all as she prepared to leave. I had known better, but had not said a thing. I told my daughters that I had recorded my birthday wishes for my wife and put them on a disc. Although I had to fly out, I wanted to be there with them in spirit, so I thought this would be the best way to convey my personal wishes. My only request to my daughters was that they play my recording at the very end, just before the party started, so that all would know what my thoughts were concerning their mother. All they had to do was turn the huge patio TV on and hit play for it to start. I left the timing up to them. It was time to text my oldest daughter's husband to let him know that I would text him my new number when I arrived at my destination. I also gave him my new email address. We had worked together for a few years. David was one of the newest rising stars with my former employer, and he had met his wife, my eldest daughter, through me. Being an accountant, he had been in on my retirement plans. As far as he knew, I was doing this all because I had found out about my wife and her lover. He had doubts until I showed him the report I got from the investigators. He was one of those who had to see it to be able to believe it. I had a bit of regret about what was going to happen tonight, partly because he himself would be hit with an eye-opening truth bomb. David did not deserve for it to be revealed like this. The way the truth had to come out made it impossible to cut out. It was his suggestion that I wipe out all contact information about me online, even going to the point of closing my Facebook page, which I did when I knew she was on the private plane home. I wanted her to sweat it out, not knowing anything. He had said she may be my mother-in-law, but she deserved it after what she did. Let her try to figure it all out. I agreed because of our state and its laws. She gets half anyway. The last thing I did was send copies of all our current bank balances and a list of any debts to my lawyer, which were minimal. According to the last property tax, our house was worth about $900,000. With my half share, I could buy a brand new home as good as what I was leaving and furnish it with cash left over. I took my cell phone and dropped it into the small garbage can beneath the kitchen sink. Since I was exiting our home for the last time, I looked around to make sure that nothing I had done would be noticeable to anyone until the party was over. It was sad to be leaving California, my home for these last 25 years, for the last time. I was headed back home to the Badlands of South Dakota as a nobody, the same way I had left. I honestly figured out that there were fewer than 10 people outside of the family who would miss me. It was knowing that my video, when shown, was going to alter a lot of people's lives that put a big smile on my face. I stopped at the retail cell phone shop of a nationwide company and bought a new cell phone. It took them a few minutes, but the manager was able to get me a local number for the area I was moving to. Once I was back in the truck, I made one phone call. When the female voice answered, I said, "This is the new number. I'm headed out." She replied, "Got it." I then shut the phone off to save the battery for emergencies. I was looking forward to the drive east in the middle of March before the weather got too hot. The countryside would be pleasant to see as it blossomed with the arrival of spring. Kendra and I had met at an Aerosmith concert back in the day. She was a local girl from California, while I was from out of state. We got married a year later on the same day. My parents flew out for the wedding. I was employed in research and development, and Kendra worked in importing and marketing. We had both been at our jobs for years. Even now, Kendra turned heads. She had a presence that captured attention when she walked into a room. Time had treated her kindly, and she maintained a figure much like the one she had when we married. She still dressed elegantly, wearing clothes that highlighted her best features. I couldn't say the same for myself. I had the typical dad bod, complete with a potbelly. Kendra was looking forward to returning home after spending the last 2 weeks with her boss and friend, Eric Hopper. She expressed some regret that her husband, Colin, had been called away unexpectedly, but that was common with two people who had demanding careers. Her time with Eric had been a needed break, but she was eager to return to her normal routine, which included their regular intimate moments. After their private jet landed, she cleared the airport and got into her company car to head home. Once Kendra arrived, she was surprised to find the whole family there. All 3 of her daughters and their husbands had gathered to celebrate. Her eldest was now 23, and the twins were a year younger. Over the next few hours, the celebration was in full swing. Kendra loved the attention she received from family, close friends, and some coworkers. She was pleasantly surprised when her boss and his wife showed up. Her eldest daughter revealed that her boss's wife had said he often bragged about Kendra, making this a perfect opportunity for them to meet. Finally, around 8 p.m., our 3 daughters congratulated their mother on reaching another major milestone. Dad didn't want to be left out, the twins said, so he recorded a special greeting for you. They turned on the 80-inch plasma screen and hit play on the DVD player. The crowd on the patio quieted down, and everyone heard my voice saying, "Happy birthday, dear." I went on to highlight a few memorable moments from the past year, sharing humorous anecdotes before getting serious. I mentioned the birth of our first grandson, the marriage of our last single daughter, our last anniversary, and plans for an upcoming second honeymoon. It's been a busy year, I said, and I believe that we, as a couple, are finally heading in a united direction. I'm looking forward to enjoying romantic weekends like we did before the kids came along. Then I came home from a trip overseas and found something on our internal security system that changed my entire perspective. A short clip began to play, revealing a conversation among my wife and 3 daughters discussing their relationships outside of marriage. The room fell silent as the clip unfolded, detailing their experiences and the names of the individuals involved. I was taken aback the first time I saw it, as it felt surreal. Hearing them talk about their relationships in such an open manner was unexpected. It was a reality that I struggled to accept. Kendra mentioned she had been involved in multiple relationships over the last decade, expressing how each had brought different experiences and excitement, though she felt fatigued by them and was already considering a new one. It became evident that each woman viewed their husbands as unaware of how they truly felt about them. Maintaining appearances was easy for them. They simply ensured their husbands believed they were the top priority in their lives. The details shared about their playtime, as they called it, were quite revealing to some of their spouses who were also in attendance. For many, this would be a night to remember. I returned to the screen and wondered if they knew they were being recorded by our internal security system. If they did, they had to have deliberately set me up. It felt like the sickest joke played on me in my life. If not, it said a lot about their true feelings toward their spouses. Their words alone weren't enough for me to believe what I had heard, but they did create a bit of doubt. The next clip showed what I discovered, thanks to the investigators I hired. The second clip was of my wife and her boss's last business trip, taken during the first week of their 2-week stay. It captured everything: the long hours spent at the beach, the only one that allowed such activities in Vancouver, British Columbia. The hotel suite they shared at the Westin Bayshore Hotel was registered under Mr. and Mrs., reflecting the intimacy of their trip. It showcased their romantic carriage ride around Stanley Park, where they whispered sweet nothings to each other, and their candlelit dinners, along with a boat ride around the cove and a day of whale watching. To those unaware, it would appear as though they were a couple on their honeymoon. By the end of the video, everyone knew I had been played for a fool more than once. The last words recorded captured it all. "I guess this was your birthday present to yourself, my dear, to celebrate your 43rd birthday with the newest love of your life. I can't prove you had a physical relationship with your boss, Eric Hopper, every night during your 2-week vacation, but I can't say you didn't either. I noted through the video, I do know for a fact that your room only had one double bed. To my 3 sons-in-law, I must ask, do you truly know what your spouses are doing behind your backs? As you have just seen, it appears that I didn't. For those who have children, are you sure your children are yours?" I continued, How many of these so-called business trips have you taken, Kendra, over the years? Have they been nothing but personal time with your conquests? Was I that bad of a lover and husband for all these years? It appears that in your eyes, I must have been, based on the duration of your special relationships. In this new reality, I saw just how little I meant to you. If you were that unhappy with our relationship, why didn't you just ask for a divorce? One final question, Kendra. Is the reason you are considered such a valuable employee to Mr. Hopper because you are willing to accommodate his requests? I have to ask that in light of what we now know about the truth. Just what is he paying you for? Does he pay you extra to engage in personal favors? Can you tell me what the going rate is for a married man to have his own personal assistant at his beck and call? I wish I could be there. I would love to hear Eric Hopper's answers to these questions. I believe his wife, if she was in attendance, would want to hear his answers too. I finished as the video screen went black. The silence on the patio was deafening. No one had a clue what to say or do. My statement raised a lot of questions and destroyed the reputation of more than a few. Even in California, where societal norms are often lax, everybody felt uncomfortable being caught up in what was happening. Many would end up having a heated discussion about our situation with their spouses when they got home that night. One thing I knew for sure, this was a celebration everyone would remember for the rest of their lives. I was later told that my wife and our 3 daughters had tears running down their faces. I wondered if it was because they could see the consequences of their conduct, or if it was because they had just been caught. I seriously doubted that any of them had any concerns about me at that time. The icing on the cake came when Eric Hopper's wife, a beautiful woman named Karen Hopper, who was just 37 years old, pulled out 2 legal envelopes, serving them both. I heard later that Karen had taken great pleasure in confronting my soon-to-be ex-wife, using some not-so-polite names. My wife and her latest lover were now being divorced by their respective spouses, each faced with the consequences of being caught and exposed in such a public manner. One would wonder what they thought about their new reality. Eric was stunned that he had been caught and exposed in front of his wife. There was no way he could ever take back what had happened. Both had seen and heard my proof. He had thought his wife had no clue, as she had never doubted or questioned anything. That's when he realized that she was my lawyer. Kendra had caused all of this. He would have to fire her if he was going to have any chance of saving his marriage. Revealing the difference between my wife and my world had just destroyed 5 marriages. My 3 sons-in-law told their wives not to bother coming home until they were ready to tell the total truth about everything. Even though the younger generation had different views on everything, including morals, principles, and standards, there were just some things that were a bridge too far. But this is California, and it's okay. Sadly, it had to take something like this for them to learn it. I drove until I felt tired and pulled off at a Motel 6, parking where my truck could be seen from the office. After getting booked, I went back and got one of my suitcases, taking it and the new cell phone into the room. After a shower, I got ready for bed and then prepared to charge the phone. Curiosity caused me to turn it on to see if I had a message from the lady who had my number. I did. The text said, "Home from the party. Call me, signed Karen, my divorce lawyer." I answered before the 3rd ring. "Hi, darling," I said as soon as she answered. "How did your day go?" "Better than we expected." Eric and I drove over to the house together at about 3. There were about 60 people there in total. Everybody was in a really good mood for 5 hours. The party went great. "You were right when you said they would not expect a thing," Karen said. "Your wife, Kendra, was thrilled, being treated like she was the queen bee." Then, just as things were winding down, your daughters played your recorded video. "As a result of what you revealed, I got 3 new clients for the firm thanks to you." Karen paused to catch her breath. As soon as the video of your wife and daughters came on, they realized that they had forgotten to turn the internal security system off that day. It was kind of funny to hear 4 women say, "We are screwed." At the same time, Karen paused to laugh. Everyone was stunned to hear the 4 women openly discuss their relationships behind their spouses' backs in such a casual and unconcerned way. She continued, "Then the clip with our spouses' romantic adventures put it over the top. Everyone knew for sure that the first conversation they heard was true. As soon as I served our spouses, everybody ran for cover. It was like someone yelled, 'Fire at your house.' Your 3 sons-in-law asked if I was a divorce lawyer. I said yes. That's why I served them both. I got 3 retainer checks on the spot. It now looks like your daughter's friends' relationships may be headed to divorce too. I drove Eric's company car home and left him there, Karen explained joyfully. Did they try to call me? I asked. After the mad rush to get the hell out of there by most of your friends and extended family, your wife did try to call you. We who were still there watched as she found your ringing cell phone in the garbage. That act of trashing your cell spoke volumes without saying a word. It was like you were telling your family you were done with them all, Karen explained. My husband stood silent, not knowing just what to say as he thought he was being so careful, I responded. The countdown is on. 6 months from the day we filed for divorce, and it can be granted. I can't say I regret finding the conversation on the security systems because without it, I would not have met you. Hopefully, it will go faster than we figure. Maybe they will be willing to resolve it all quickly without a fight. Do you still want everything sold and turned to cash? Karen asked. Yes, unless she can find a way to buy me out. With the exodus of people leaving California, that might be a better option for me. For if that's the way she wants to go, I said. Tomorrow, for her, the panic will set in. You're right. I would love to see her face when she finds out you're no longer with your former employer, Karen said. I will put my law practice up for sale tomorrow. I told my sister and her husband that you're on the way. He's looking forward to meeting you. He still believes it was your influence that got him his tractor dealership a few years back. This new reality that they have created for all of us has consequences that have just begun. I wonder if they will still be laughing about it all when we're done, I replied before saying goodbye. Kiara was standing there holding her husband's cell phone in her hands. She needed to tell him that Eric Hopper meant nothing to her. She wanted him to know that his 3 daughters were his. Then it finally sunk in. He no longer cared what the truth was. This was his way of publicly letting everyone know that he was done with them all. She and her ongoing lies were to blame. She had been so self-centered that she had never thought about the consequences of getting caught. It's hard to admit to oneself that the fun and excitement she had gotten on the side, in the end, was not worth what it was going to cost. From this, there was no going back. Lowe was still a small town in a lot of ways. They may forgive, but they will never forget. There would always be whispers behind her back. Colin, with what he had done, had sent a message. He had just written them all out of his life, at least until he got over his anger. Though it might take him a while, he always had forgiven her bad conduct in the past. Perhaps he would again. That was when Kendra began to hold on to the belief that in time, she would be able to get him to come back. Kendra admitted to herself that she hadn't planned her lifestyle but had slowly evolved into it over the years. Being progressive-minded, it was normal for her to accept no responsibility and blame someone else. She never could see anything wrong in what she was doing. After all, no one was getting hurt. Having gotten away with it once, she soon found herself in a second situation. Eric Hopper was her 3rd friends with benefits relationship. Until today, she had never believed she would be caught. Colin and she had been so busy with their careers that when they were home, they had always focused on each other, leaving the world outside their front door. It had been her own carelessness that tipped him off. Now, because of her conduct, even her daughters were facing divorce. Kendra was having a hard time figuring out why Colin had done it this way instead of dealing with it privately like he always had. For him, this was so far beyond his character. Was what she had done really that bad in his eyes? After all, it did not hurt anyone. I thought back to when I had discovered the video of my wife and daughters discussing their activities 6 months ago. I never thought that it would lead to where I was now. Karen and I had grown up less than 20 miles from each other, but because of our age, we had never met. I was out of high school before she even started. I had booked an appointment with her firm to start looking into the possibility of a divorce, and by luck, I had been assigned to her. After retaining her services, I showed her the video, and that was when she went into shock. The man my wife was talking about had to be her husband. It took her going into her personal Facebook page for me to identify for sure that we were talking about the same man. We both realized that day our marriages were over, and we were now bonded together because of our spouse's conduct. We decided that day, after a long conversation about her ethics, to join forces and work together. As we investigated, our own relationship grew. At first, we kept our professional relationship just that, but we found ourselves helping each other in the healing process. In a matter of weeks, we had become friends. Unless one has gone through it, you can't even comprehend the betrayal, anger, hurt, and hate you go through. We ended up having a lot of phone conversations to work through those emotional challenges. That's how our relationship started. Out of our mutual needs, we found ourselves supporting each other. I don't know how it came out about our roots, but it helped draw us together even more. We were both kindred spirits because of some of our life experiences and shared memories of places we both knew. When you laugh together about what you did back then, it draws you in. Those little things we talked about lightened our mood at times. Neither one of us was looking for more, but somehow it happened. It had reached the point last week, after dealing with her daughters, that we were forced to admit to each other that we had fallen in love. So far, our relationship had been strictly platonic. We planned to keep it that way until our divorces were granted because we wanted to keep things simple. It had been 12 days ago, just after I had said goodbye to Kendra, when Karen called. She had just told her daughters about their father, and they hadn't believed her. I asked her if her oldest daughter was still there with her, and she said yes. I asked her to put her daughter on. I told her daughter that their mother was my lawyer and that I had things I could show them, but because of our legal relationship, their mother couldn't disclose or discuss them. I explained that I had no idea who their mother was when I hired her to handle my divorce. It wasn't until she first viewed what my evidence showed that we learned we both had the same problem. I suggested that before they passed judgment on what they heard, they should be open enough to view the evidence together. Karen's daughters showed up at my place about half an hour later. I showed the young ladies how the house's security system worked. You could turn the outside off before entering the house, and if you forgot to turn the internal one off, it would automatically record any sound or movement. I thought they needed to understand how the video itself was created before showing what was recorded. I then had Amber and Meadow watch the discussion between my wife and our daughters. They were shocked. The fact that my wife was discussing intimate details about her life with their father had to be disturbing. This is what your mother saw after I hired her, I explained. Because of her ethics, she could not disclose to you how she knew. As we spoke, I added, right now, your father and my wife are in Vancouver, British Columbia, on their semi-annual business trip. I have investigators gathering further proof regarding both your mother and me. When Kendra, my wife, returns, she will be served with the petition for divorce. I ended up having a long conversation with the two teenage girls about vows and their significance. I pointed out that forgiveness is easy, but the challenge for everyone involved will be overcoming the issue of trust. I told my daughters they have learned that their mother's long-term bad conduct has no consequences, and she is inadvertently teaching them to do the same. I don't know if they have or haven't. That will be for others to sort out. As you heard, Kendra has been doing this for years. I don't blame their father as much, but in their mother's eyes, he shares the same guilt. Anyone in our situation must ask themselves whether our spouses were sincere when they made their marriage vows years ago. I explained that this has forced us to reflect on our entire marriage with a new perspective. Things now appear to be quite different from what we once thought. We were simply blinded by life to see the reality, but looking through these new eyes, it seems that both your mother and I have had our lives upended due to our actions. If it weren't for our children, everything we knew about our life would seem like nothing more than a facade. I was shocked when Meadow, Kendra's youngest, said she sees that both her mother's and my situation have more problems than what we have discussed. If either of you had any respect for one another, it should have stopped them from behaving that way in the first place. I admitted I had never considered that before, and I told her so. I expressed my surprise at such insight coming from someone so young. As soon as they left, I called Kendra to share how it went. I hoped it helped, and later found out that her daughters found me easy to talk to. Amber remarked that my manner is much like their father's. I listen, then pause before I speak, and when I do, my insights emerge clearly, similar to their grandfather. I try to express what I need to say in ways that make it easy for them to understand. I don't complicate matters, making the complex seem simple. That's because, like me, I come from a more straightforward background. Kendra explained there is still a lot of simplicity in me. I have decided to return to restore my father's home and enjoy life instead of being caught up in this hectic world. Here, everything feels like a rat race. It's always go, go, go. Colin is finally realizing, like me, the quality of life we left behind as we grew up, and we both want that simpler way of life back. As he puts it, he's done with keeping up with the Joneses. At 6 o'clock the next morning, I was on my way. I got back on Interstate 80 East. By tonight, I hope to be out of Nevada and into northern Utah near the Wyoming border. I took my time to enjoy some sights I had longed to see. Surprisingly, all things considered, I felt at peace that night after checking into a hotel. I checked my new email account and saw a message to call my oldest son-in-law. Thankfully, he had provided his phone number. "Hi, David," I said. "Hi, Dad, glad you called," he replied. "I've got a lot to tell you, but first, where in the hell are you?" "I'm on the road, licking my wounds," I said with a serious chuckle. "I'll convey those words to the person who asked me to see if I'd heard from you," David said. "It has been a crazy day. Kendra showed up at the office first thing this morning, demanding to know where you had gone. She had decided to catch a plane and fly out to work things out with you. She still thought she could save the relationship," he said before continuing. "When she was told you had retired, she asked for confirmation, so I was called in to talk to her. I told her you had taken early retirement and were in the process of moving. She asked where, and I said I didn't know. She called me a liar, saying, 'You know where the retirement checks will be sent or can find out.' I said if I released that information, I could be fired. It went downhill from there, and I had to have security escort her out. I couldn't help but laugh, though I knew I probably shouldn't have." "Oh, it gets better, Dad." Carrie called and said her mom got fired right after Eric Hopper was served with your $5 million alienation of affection suit from some lawyer in Vancouver. She had to call a taxi to get home. Kendra went to a labor lawyer and gave him another case to deal with. Somehow, they got him served around 4 o'clock this afternoon, David explained. "Carrie wants to come home and see our son. I told her we're doing nothing until I confirm our son is indeed mine, and if she doesn't like that, she can take me to court." Carrie claims she hasn't been with anyone since we were married. I responded that her own words in the recorded chat say otherwise. "Well, at least they're not bothering me about it," I said with a chuckle. "I'm taking the time to see some sights I've wanted to see. This mini vacation is turning out to be the best thing I've done in a while." "The question is, are you really going to divorce her?" David asked. "The twins were able to get their clothing, and for now have moved in with Kendra," David said. "My wife is staying there too. Everyone is finding that no one wants anything to do with them right now. Everyone's too raw to think straight. As for the divorce, it boils down to what the DNA proves. If he's not my son, there's no reason for us to stay together. Right now, it appears that, like you, I got sold a package of goods based on what she felt I needed to see. For about 6 months, I've been working out my feelings. Believe me, it takes time to figure out what you can live with, so give it time and don't rush into anything. I said time has allowed me to get on with my life and given me the chance to restart my life. It's now headed in a new direction, and I'm actually excited about it." "So you're not coming back?" David asked. "Only if one of my lawyers needs me for court," I said. "The place I am moving to, because of the tax difference and the cost of living difference, I will be way ahead financially. Besides, the CEO wants me to work as an advisor from time to time. I can do that from my new home with a secured line and my computer, so I'll never be truly out of it." I told him I was willing as long as I didn't have to wear a suit or a tie. "Well, Dad, they are already saying that they wish you were here," David said. "I learned that most would throw their ideas at you, and you would point out what would be good about it and what could be wrong. Is this your new cell phone number?" "Yes, it is, but for now, keep it to yourself," I said. "Last thought. The next time you talk to Kendra and she asks about me, tell her I said she can always go back to one of her other friends for support. After all, they all had accepted her before. If she argues about it, just say, 'Well, for the last 10 years, you have proven he was nothing but your backup plan.'" I didn't know it, but David had recorded our conversation and sent it on to my wife and my 3 daughters. I would learn later that KRA had not been impressed. She thought I had no right to advise my son-in-law on anything after all. After all, I was just a man. My daughters were beginning to realize the cost of their following their mother's lifestyle choices. Each of their husbands wanted as little contact with them as possible, and they were starting to turn on their mother. The next call was to Karen, who was excited to hear from me. She and her staff had been swamped with another 5 wrong parties because of my wife's surprise birthday party. It seems that because of what happened, 1 or 2 of Kendra's former partners had been discovered. She knew about Kendra's termination and said it was an attempt by Eric to try to get her interested in reconciliation, but she wasn't going there. He doesn't realize it, but the board of directors of his company had already talked to her this evening, explaining everything. Kendra would be hired back and elevated in her position, and he would be demoted for using company assets for personal reasons. She was just that good at what she did. Karen had broken the news to her daughters that she was moving back to South Dakota after her divorce was final. If they wanted to stay in California, they would have to find their own place to live or move in with their dad. Karen said, "I've reached the age where I want a simpler life." Meadow asked, "Is it because you have fallen in love with Colin?" Karen said, "I told her that I had, but neither of us had acted upon it. I had to explain to her how it had happened. I had to tell them our whole story from beginning to now." Meadow said, "I hope it makes you feel young again." Karen had said it did. Then she told her daughters that they were both wanted in her life and were welcome to come with her when she moved back to be with me and her family. Karen said, "I told them that you were old enough to decide for yourself what kind of person you will be and what kind of life you want. Learn from what I am dealing with." That's when it hit me. The odds of Kendra ever finding another man like me again because of the public nature of our breakup were highly unlikely. As long as she remained in the area, anyone who knew of the situation would likely pass on her because of her history before they got serious. Her own conduct had forever ruined the chance to have an honest, loving relationship with any man. I wondered how long it would take for that reality to sink in. It was about lunchtime when I pulled into my hometown. I had taken over 3 days to get here. I found a local diner and went in to eat lunch before heading out to the farm. During my last week at work, I had arranged for the electrical work to be hooked up. While waiting for my burger and fries, I was drinking a coffee when someone said, "Son of a gun, is that you, Colin?" I turned to see Uncle John walk in and sit down at my booth. "It's good to see you, son. You're looking good. Where's the wife of yours?" I responded with a smile. "She and our daughters are out at the house getting it ready. I had to go over and solve some minor plumbing problems. The house is basically move-in ready. They cleaned up the house, got the refrigerator repaired and working, and replaced the fuses on the old stove. You will most likely want to update and modernize," Uncle John said. "We now live in town, as Robert and his wife have taken over the farm. Could you order some food on me? We can get caught up on things." I said it was nice to be back with my family. Before heading out to my childhood home, I stopped at the local grocery store and started picking up the basics. It was surprising to see how much cheaper food prices were here. They weren't taxed heavily, and the prices reflected that. I had filled 2 carts by the time I got to the checkout. The cashier and I had gone to school together, so we caught up a bit as she rang me through. When I got to my family home, I was surprised at how good it looked from the outside. It had been a long time since I had lived in a completely brick home. My aunt and cousins came out to greet me, then helped me bring in the groceries. As soon as we put them away, the coffee pot was turned on. After they left, I took a close look at the house. Uncle John was right. I would have to have some major updating done. I called him to get a couple of names of good construction crews that he would use. He did better than that. 2 hours later, he brought them to the house, giving me time to unpack some of my stuff. After going through everything, we decided that it would cost less to build a brand new house. The old house would have to be stripped to the bones. All the electrical wiring would need to be replaced because it was so old. The lead pipes, once standard, would have to go. The barn was still in good shape, and with a new roof, a few boards replaced, and a paint job, it would be as good as new. The only major thing I would have to do was the electrical work. The stalls would be taken out so I could use it as my workshop for tractor and heavy equipment repairs. I called Karen that night and told her what I had learned. We decided we wanted a 1-floor house with a small cold cellar for storage built on a 4-foot crawl space that would be completely insulated for the cold winters. I had to promise to go to her brother-in-law's dealership to introduce myself the next day. I called the contractor and told him what I wanted. He said he had a few samples of plans that he would bring over for me to look at. After work, I drove the truck rental back to the nearest rental shop. They gladly drove me to the nearest car dealership, where I bought a nice, slightly used Ford truck that had almost no mileage. I got it transferred and insured before returning the rental. I hit the bank, made a deposit, picked up a few blank checks, and ordered some. The $1.75 difference a gallon for gas shocked me. It was a lot less. I then drove over to introduce myself to Karen's older brother. It turned out I'd gone to high school with him. He offered me a job right on the spot. I could start when I was ready. That was when I told him of my plans and the relationship I had with the corporation going forward. He had to tease me a bit about my relationship with his sister. He told me he had never really understood his sister's first husband, and I wasn't alone in that thought. Neither did I. The contractor and I worked out a price for building a 4-bedroom home with an extra-large 2-car garage to be built behind the old house. We decided to put in a new septic system, gas for heat, water, and cooking, with a large gas generator for electricity when needed. It would have an open floor plan with a laundry/mudroom at the back, which would have a door to the big garage. The entry to the cold cellar and the furnace room would be off the side of the garage, going down beneath the house. The 4-foot crawl space would be double insulated, including underneath the main floor, with access to it from the furnace room. It was nice to know that what I should get out of the divorce would cover the cost. I had just finished talking to Karen, letting her know that I had touched base with her brother and that I had signed the contract for building the new house when David called. "KRA has hired a private firm to find you, Dad," David said. "She still believes you two can work it out." "There's nothing to work out. There is nothing left that I want. If we got back together, she'd just do the same again in a different way," I said. It's sad that someone so intelligent is incapable of seeing that simple truth. No wonder this country is so screwed up. I was surprised when David got very quiet. I had to ask if he was still there. "Yeah, I am," he said. "It's just that your statement has made me look at things from a different perspective. Your statement is so simple yet so profound. We have a lot of so-called brilliant people who can't see a simple truth. That's why we have so many problems in our government. They focus on what's in front of them, and being so intelligent, they cannot see what created the problem in the first place. The result is that whatever they do just makes it worse, and it's always someone else's fault. David, your mother-in-law will never see what she did as the problem," I explained. "I am the problem because of the way I am looking at it. My views are too old-fashioned for her to comprehend or understand. I'm not progressive and not keeping up to date with what's now considered acceptable by those who are with it. She has allowed the changing views of what liberalism is in California to change her. I didn't like many of their kind. She just believes I need to be retrained to think the right way. She couldn't handle me having an affair, but I'm just supposed to accept the fact that she has hers and live with it. She's not sorry for her conduct. She's just sorry that she got caught." "Damn, Dad, you're right," he replied. "I'm going to have a long talk with your daughter, Carrie, about this because she has to see it from your side. She's got to learn that marriage means equality in all things. My own father used to say what's good for the goose is good for the gander. The way Mother was acting, it is now obvious that she viewed you as nothing but a means to an end. David, may I make the suggestion that you demand that the two of you go for marriage counseling? If she agrees to go that route, try to find one that has a conservative point of view. By exposing her to the other side in a personal way, it may be the only thing that will counter the progressive view she has grown up with." I said, "She was exposed to it with me, but her mother, it appears, has countered any effect I had on her growing up. Unless she is willing to find that balance, you guys don't have a chance. For your own sanity, you will have to walk away." I started working on the barn and tearing out the stalls. It kept me busy. The physical work was demanding, but it was good to be working my muscles again. I found myself enjoying it. Thursday night, I got a call that surprised the heck out of me. It was from Karen. Her daughters felt I needed cheering up. She said they had called my brother to inform him of our divorce. They didn't know he had already known for over 4 months. Meadow explained how I had found out about their father's infidelity and mentioned how they had met. Joseph told them that he had gone to school with me and explained how I had gotten him the dealership years ago. I owe that man a lot. It came out that I had moved back to take over my family's farm that I owned. They ended up talking about us for about an hour. Slowly everything came out, and they were surprised that their favorite uncle approved of our relationship. Please make sure that they don't let that information out. KRA has hired a firm to try to find me, I said. She's convinced herself that if she can just talk to me, she can get me to forgive and come back. How did you find that out? Karen asked. I called my oldest son-in-law at the office. He's keeping me informed, I said. Plus, in talking to me, he's starting to get a focus on how he is going to approach things going forward. No problem with that, Karen said. My daughters won't tell anyone after what they have done. Being curious, I asked, what did they do? They used my credit card and booked me a flight. I arrive at the regional airport at 8 p.m. on Friday night and return on Sunday evening, Karen explained. Start living the dream, Mom. They said you both deserve it. I was there waiting for her, holding a dozen roses, filled with anticipation and hope. This weekend, after all, would be our first official time together. I had to laugh. The last time I felt this young and foolish, I had been a teenager. I watched a goddess walking toward me, a total brunette whose hairstyle accented her face, letting its natural features shine. I had to smile. It was the first time I had seen her dressed casually in blue jeans with a yellow blouse and a soft, denim-like jacket. She had a wholesome look, which was a delight to see. You could tell that she was comfortable in her own skin. I knew she wouldn't have time to eat, so as soon as we got her suitcase, we were off to the local Ruby Tuesdays, where I had a surprise waiting. After parking the truck and locking her suitcase in behind the front seat, we headed in. Her brother and sister-in-law were waiting for us. By the time dinner was done, Karen had agreed to become her brother's lawyer when needed after she moved home. I didn't know what to expect when I drove down the driveway to the house I had grown up in. It was just like every home built in the 60s. It was closed in and tightly built for the times. Karen smiled as soon as she stepped inside. It's just like what I grew up in, she laughed. If you got a beer mug, the ice would be fine. After getting us each a beer, I pulled out a couple of my parents' old 33 RPM records and put them on. It was nice listening to Dean Martin, Sammy Davis, and Old Blue Eyes himself as we snuggled like teenagers on the couch. Those were the songs our parents listened to as we were growing up. We were taking it slow, as we both wanted to be sure we were headed in the right direction. Kendra Waite was not happy. She was used to getting her own way. She needed to talk to her husband, Colin, and was getting nowhere in her attempt to find him. There was no recorded flight of him leaving, no recorded car rental or anything. Even the private investigators were finding nothing. She had found his Facebook page and closed his credit card at his request with Bank of America. Everything she could think of was leading to a dead end. Every day that week, his lawyer had called asking for the name of her lawyer. She hadn't hired one because she felt their marriage could be saved. He had removed all of his contacts from the old telephone log they used when they had a landline. She knew he had relatives but couldn't remember their names. His side of the family had never been important to her, so she hadn't paid much attention when he mentioned them. He had been so careful in removing all traces of himself that she couldn't even get his social security number. Even her daughters were starting to get worried about him. He had always had daily contact with them since he left. No one had heard from him except for David, who wasn't telling. He had told her oldest daughter, Carrie, there should be no contact until he proved that little Colin was his son, yet he didn't seem to be in any hurry to get that done. Carrie had confronted him about it, but he had laughed, which was not how a husband was supposed to act. Colin wasn't behaving like himself, and it was frustrating her. Colin had always done what he should. It was the one constant she could rely on. This frustration made her realize that now she had to hire someone to do what he had always done. The problem was that hired help did not do it with as much care and love as Colin did. This whole situation was causing a strain on everyone. If Colin had just done what he always had, her relationship with her 3 daughters would not be unraveling. The 3 of them were partly blaming her for the problems in their relationships, which was unfair. Colin was not doing what he should. It was each woman's responsibility to keep the men in their lives in line. Every man in a relationship with a woman has to learn that it's the woman who is the boss. When she found her husband Colin, she would make him pay dearly for his improper conduct toward her and their children. There is nothing more simple or beautiful than sitting on the porch drinking a cup of coffee and watching the dawn of the day come alive. I know because that was what Karen and I were doing. Until now, I could never see why my parents would start their day like this whenever they could. Being here, feeling loved and appreciated by the one you're with, gives you the assurance that you can face anything that comes in front of you. They could sit and watch without saying a word because they saw their world the same way. I took her hand and held it just the same way my dad would for my mom. I could tell that without saying a word, I was speaking volumes. While driving back home, I realized that I was returning to what I had always been and leaving behind what I had become. I saw the changes starting in me. I felt more secure and at peace than I could ever remember. I said softly, "I saw that same cloud leaving you last night as you stepped down toward me. It's a feeling you can't express until you experience it yourself. Your words express quite clearly that it's affecting you as well. It's a culture shock, at least for me. Nothing seems phony here. It's all real. Here, you can hear yourself think. The silence of the morning allows it." "I had forgotten how beautiful and calming it is," Karen said. "Moments like this reinforce the quality of life that can only be found when two hearts are ready." It was an eye-opening weekend for both of us. We began to learn about ourselves. Although we came close, we did not become intimately involved. Both of us wanted more to the relationship than just physical attraction. I met her parents for the first time. It was a good visit, and I got put to work fixing the timing on his tractor and a few minor things. It took about 4 hours to get it done, but when I was finished, it ran smoothly and steered straight. Karen saw me covered in oil, grease, and dirt for the first time. She watched me clean up in her parents' mudroom, smiling the whole time. Mudrooms, my mom would say, were created for women so their husbands didn't track the mess into the house. Her dad said that the tractor would have been in the shop for a week if I hadn't been there. Her mom was thrilled about the prospect of having her only daughter coming home. It was sad to see her off at the airport on Sunday evening. It had been 2 months since I left California, and things were moving along. Kendra had finally gotten a lawyer. A 50-50 split had been approved by the court. Karen's husband was still being unreasonable, trying to save every penny he could. David and Carrie were seeing a marriage counselor since the baby was his. They were meeting weekly and making slow progress. Carrie was looking at the situation quite differently as she was forced to see the other side. Little Colin was growing quickly, and I was looking forward to seeing him. Kara and my daughter's Faith and Hope were both going through a divorce. Their former husbands had told them they would never be able to trust them again. Sadly, I fully understood why the relationship between my ex-wife and her daughters had forever been changed. I was back in Lodi, having been flown in by private jet. I would be spending a week or two going through the company's newest test model to see if it would pass the final inspection before going into mass production in 2022. I would be spending the next 2 weeks putting it through a list of assessments to ensure durability, strength, ease of movement, and repairability. I had been booked by the firm into one of the town's Hampton Inn suites. Amber Hopper had decided to take her mother for supper at one of the restaurants in the hotel I was in. They were already seated when I walked in. Amber saw me and smiled as I approached her. We had met earlier that day for coffee to ensure everything was going according to our plans. "Mom, I hope you don't get mad at me, but I invited a friend to join us, so you might want to slide a little further into the booth," Amber said. "I think you'll be delighted to see them." Karen said, "What are you up to?" as she slid over to allow more room for someone else. "It's just somebody I've gotten to know over the last 5 weeks, and both Meadow and I agree that we're looking forward to spending a lot more time with him in the future," Amber said as I sat down. Karen turned her face toward me, breaking out in a huge smile once she realized who I was. Over the last 2 months, I had grown a mustache and a goatee and appeared to have lost a lot of weight. The soft body fat had just changed to muscle. "Wow, what a surprise," Karen said. "I love your new look, but what are you doing here?" "First of all, I'm going to have a nice dinner with my girlfriend and her daughter. During the meal, I will explain," I said. "Amber, thank you for helping me pull off this little surprise." Just as we were starting to order our dinner, Meadow showed up. "I hope I'm not too late," Meadow said as she sat down. I ended up having to work a little bit longer than I planned. During the meal, I explained that I was in town to test out a new model planned for release in 3 years. The biggest change was that the huge tractor was designed to run off natural gas. If it worked to our expectations, farmers would be able to build a refill station right on the farm for the cost of labor. We had planned the cost needed to purchase the equipment to include the fixtures for the refill pump. Since natural gas was cheaper and cleaner than regular gasoline, we thought we had a very marketable product. If the test model was a success, The company would be offering it as part of a whole new line. Just before we prepared to order dessert, Karen's daughters asked the question, "Do you two hope to be settled in South Dakota before school starts in September?" Karen said, "Pretty much, yes." "Why?" "How far is Vermilion from your new home, Mom?" Amber asked. "About 40 miles from the farm." "Why?" "I start working for an MBA at the University of South Dakota this fall, if you'll allow me to live with you guys. If not, I can stay at Uncle Joseph's. I chose that one because the yearly cost is one of the cheapest in the country, and I can cut down my cost of living." Karen was smiling while trying to hold in her tears. I reached down, taking her hand into mine, holding it tightly. Karen said quietly, "You were right. We are building a new 4-bedroom house. It will be finished sometime next month. We wanted to be prepared in case you both decided to come, so you will have to let your mother know what color scheme you will want for your bedrooms," I said. "You were both planning on both of us coming?" Meadow said more hopefully. Karen said, "We both had to let you make the decision on your own. If I had forced you to, you both would have blamed Colin. He would have ended up paying for it in the long run because of the resentment you would have carried." "How did you figure that out, Mom?" Amber asked. "Colin asked me point blank if I trusted you two to make the right decision about what's best for yourselves," I said. "I said yes." She explained. "He said then let them. Because from what I have seen and learned about your relationship, it's stronger and more vibrant than what they have with their dad." Amber and Meadow looked at me with puzzled eyes. Then Amber spoke. "That first night, you had sized us up. By the time we left, you had a good idea of what we would end up doing, didn't you?" "Colin, I knew you were going for further education and understood that it could be anywhere." Meadow was the one I concentrated on. It was when she brought out the point of respect that I knew how it would turn out. I explained the hardest thing I had to do was keep reminding your mother that it would all turn out right. The hardest part in any situation is the unknown and the time to allow what is needed to come out. We had just finished dinner and were leaving. Karen and I were going to a theater to see one of the latest releases, while Amber and Meadow were heading home. That was when I was spotted by Kendra. She was driving in as I opened the car rental door for Karen. It took her a few minutes to realize it was me because of the change in my appearance. My lifestyle was different, as I no longer made my living sitting behind a desk looking at a computer. By the time she did, we were gone. I had gotten slimmer working on the barn, installing a wood stove for heat and doing a general cleanup. I had developed firmness in my muscles that I hadn't had in years. The old pot belly I had carried for years was long gone. I now had a slender build and looked younger than I had in years, as the stress I carried was lifted. In many ways, I had been reborn. Parts of my soul that had been hidden by my relationships over time were emerging as if they had been set free. I dropped Karen off after the movie and returned to my suite after leaving a request for a wake-up call in the morning. Security recognized me and signed me in so I could get my first look at the finished new design. This was what I enjoyed the most. Seeing the final product ready for approval before mass production. Research and development can be quite boring, but witnessing the finished product in its glory made it worthwhile. I got to work and was already into testing it before the rest of the team showed up. I had discovered a couple of minor adjustments that needed changing and had rerouted the feeding line so it wouldn't be affected by the direct heat. I had even documented these for the final report. Everybody was surprised and pleased with how good I looked. The president came in while I was using the test tractor to haul and push back 2,000 pounds. It handled and maneuvered with ease, especially through the mud bed we had formed for this test. He had to laugh seeing me in a pair of blue jeans, wearing a white t-shirt and a blue baseball hat on backward, operating that huge tractor like I owned it. The gears changed smoothly, and the tractor's arms could hold the weight we required. I tried to tip it numerous times, but failed every attempt. I even drove it on 2 wheels off a ramp, and it came back down on all 4s, just as it should. The balance in this piece of equipment was excellent. "Colin, you're still the man," the president said. "If you could turn this tractor on your head, you would. What's your first impression of this beast? If it can take what I will put it through, it's going to be in the top 5 that we have ever designed so far. Besides a couple of minor adjustments, it's passing with flying colors. An added plus is that it uses less fuel than a normal diesel engine," I said as I offered my hand. "Good to see you again, Pete." We would give you your old position back if you wanted, he said with a smile. But by the way you look, I understand why you moved on. Where did you find the fountain of youth? Little did he understand that he had discovered the secret to my evaluating a new product. I treated it the same way I did my first truck. If it could survive what I would do to it, then it became a good truck. By the end of the day, I said it had held up well, 1 down, 2 to go. It was almost 7 before I got back to my hotel. As I entered the lobby, I spotted my daughter Carrie and her husband David waiting. Carrie was holding little Colin. I walked in looking like I needed a shower, as I was covered in dry mud from head to toe. Carrie spotted me and walked toward me. "Hi, Dad," she said. "You're looking really good. Do you have time to talk to us or not?" I looked over at David and caught his signal, so I said, "Yes, but let me go have a shower first." Then David joined us. "Look, you two can wait here or come up and wait in the suite that has a kitchen," I said. "We can order food to be brought up, or we can eat down here. Whichever way is fine by me. Let's go to your suite and order the food while you're showering, then we can have a private talk that's long overdue," Carrie said. So that's what we did. We ordered what we wanted through room service, then I went for a quick shower. As I was getting dressed, Karen called. So I told her what was going on and promised to call her back when I was done. I cracked open a bottle of Crown Royal and poured us all a drink. The kids wanted Coke in theirs. I added just a bit of water to mine and gave it a stir. "Dad, David and I have been going through a lot of issues these last 2 months. It took the conversation you found to bring it to the forefront," Carrie said seriously. "I just moved home last week. Mom had been talking about her outside relationships for years. We all thought you knew and had approved. Mom had justified her conduct by saying the two of you had completely different drives. David and I were getting nowhere. So I had a polygraph done to help verify for both of us what I had or had not done. Until I did that, we were headed for divorce." "I see," I said. "I hope you both realize that because of the damage done to both of you, it's going to take time and complete honesty to rebuild a new relationship going forward." I took my grandson into my arms and held the little tyke next to my chest, with his little head resting on my shoulder. I asked David to take a picture of me holding him. I learned that in many ways I was behaving like my mother, justifying everything she did by her point of view. She can't see that it still does not make what she did right. Carrie went on to say she was acting impulsively, as it felt so natural. Now, she finds herself stopping to think a lot before doing anything. To be honest, it's been quite a shock. "Dad," David said, "I'm seeing a side of her that I didn't know was there. It has led me to believe that we have more than a 50-50 chance of making it. Just remember it takes time, honest communication, and a heart and mind that really listens." I said, "You're both young, so remember that it is not unreasonable to seek independent help or advice." Kendra allowed the views of society to interfere with our marriage until she justified to herself abandoning her marriage vows. I bet she still is blaming me for it ending. "Dad, you're right," Carrie said. "I told my sisters that I was done listening to her justifications. I had a marriage I wanted to save. We got into an argument, and I told them that when they got their heads out of their butts, we would talk. Until then, don't waste my time." With that said, our food arrived. It was nice to share dinner with them. Carrie asked if I had been following some diet plan. I laughed and explained that I had just been working physically instead of mentally, and my body was responding favorably. I no longer spend my days sitting behind a desk or on the couch. It was 10 before they left. As they were leaving, Carrie hugged me and whispered, "I like this new dad I'm seeing." I laughed and explained that since the divorce started, parts that I had kept hidden were coming out because my long-term relationship with your mother had affected me in ways I could not see. I texted Karen to see if she was still up. She was, so I called her and explained how the evening had gone. "Time heals all wounds" is a favorite saying, but that's not true. It just means that acceptance of what happened has come. Nothing more, nothing less. You have trained yourself to adjust to it and accept what you cannot change. Still, it does not make it right, although some will claim it does. Faith and Hope learned that the hard way. Tuesday night, it was again about 7 when I walked into the lobby of the Hampton Inn. My 2 young daughters were waiting for me. My first thought was that Kendra had sent the double-barreled shotgun at me. Boy, was I ever right. My twin daughters decided they were going to lecture me on my treatment of their mom. In their eyes, My conduct towards their mother was nothing but cowardice. I took the young ladies back to my suite for privacy before they went after me for leaving my marriage with their mother. They admitted that both their marriages were over because their husbands, like me, could not handle them being totally modern-day liberated women. I had enough of their complaints, so I called security. When security came, I asked them to remove the young ladies because I was not interested in what they were offering me. My daughters were escorted out the back door and told never to return to the Hampton. The security staff informed them both that they did not appreciate high-class people trying to pass on some social disease to their unsuspecting guests. Karen thought what I did was hilarious. She said those young ladies would be doing a lot of thinking tonight because without love, someone is always paying in some way. Can I tell Amber and Meadow about this? She asked. I said yes. If one wanted to light a stick of dynamite without a match, I couldn't have done a better job. Carrie called my room about 2 hours later. Bravo, Dad. Well done, Carrie said. My two sisters have just learned that their behavior stinks just like all others. They just left here still in tears. I couldn't resist the opportunity to laugh because neither of them would give me the chance to explain anything. Their conduct made it clear they did not want to hear my explanation. Finally, I made the only call I could. Security ran a background check on both of them. They came up clean. Faith and Hope tried to explain that with all of you having different last names, they didn't buy it. Carrie said I told them that when their friends with benefits were whining and dining them, weren't they, in fact, being paid for in advance? By the look on their faces, I think they finally got it. I'm so glad now that I never went down that road. I'm ashamed now that I talked about it. Was David in on the conversation? I asked. He heard it all and was pleasantly surprised by how I explained things. It helped us a lot because we are both now seeing what happened with clear eyes. Carrie explained how our mother could have convinced us that what she was doing was all right. Faith and Hope are really hurting. It's going to be a while before they work it all out. Until that moment, they did not see that their conduct made them no better than the people they had looked down upon for years. Carrie explained. I said, think about this. You trashed our father for what he did. Did you ever think about what your conduct and Mom did to him? Or did you only care about yourself? That, my dear, is a question I'm still trying to answer for myself. I said Mom painted our world with rose-colored glasses, using her progressive views to make everything acceptable. It took her getting caught for your daughters to see the reality of their world for what it was. Carrie said it's sad that most of our society is still wearing theirs and are so blind to the truth that's staring them right in the face. Carrie, you learned something that a lot of adults will never understand in their life, I said. What's that, Dad? My eldest daughter asked. The ability and knowledge to think logically, even about the simplest things, I replied. That is what makes your mother's and my walk in life so different. Welcome to my world. Too bad you had to learn it the hard way. Wednesday night, I went to Karen's for a family dinner. The girls wanted to start planning for the move and how we were going to get it done. I told them what I had learned from Carrie the previous night. After dinner, we did the dishes. I washed while the girls dried and put them away. Eventually, the girls caught us sharing a kiss, and they teased us about it for the rest of the evening. On Friday evening, Karen and I were out, getting ready to enjoy a private dinner at a restaurant down by the pier. We were sitting across from each other, looking into each other's eyes and having a drink before ordering when the twins walked in. The hostess approached us, saying, "Your daughters noticed you, Mr. Wade, and were wondering if you would allow them to join your table." I hesitated, but Karen said, "Yes, we would like them to." I stood up and moved over to sit beside her. "You can't leave things the way they are with them, no matter what," Karen said. "I know you don't like them right now, but you still love them." I realized she was right. We watched as the hostess brought my daughters to our table. By their looks, we both realized they had a lot on their minds. Faith and Hope, let me introduce you to Karen, who not only is my lawyer but now my girlfriend, I said firmly. If you're here to scold me some more, please just leave. Dad, we deserve that, Faith said. We had a long talk with Carrie Tuesday night. She was brutal with us and pulled no punches. We went there expecting some support, Hope explained. What we got was the truth shoved down our throats. By the time she was through with us, we knew just what our own conduct had shown about ourselves. It really does not paint us in a good way, Faith added. Carrie showed us that we were receiving rewards for our actions, like a service being offered, but in a different way. We talked about our conduct and came to understand that many people do it for survival, not by choice. Yet we were high and mighty and judged them for it, Hope explained. We did it because we thought it was fun and believed we were doing nothing wrong. It makes our actions a lot worse. When we got home, we confronted Mom about it, and it ended up in a huge argument. Mother ended up saying we had been listening to too much of your conservative views, Faith said. Mom, in one of her rants, said, so what if others got hurt? They should learn to grow up. In our society, the only wrong is getting caught. There are no consequences for social crimes. Look at our federal government. We have some of the biggest politicians making money illegally, and nothing happens to them. It shows the laws only apply to some. Nothing is black or white, Hope said. Each of us has the right to live our lives as we see fit, they added. Mom still has no remorse or guilt. That's when it hit us. We teach our students what is right and wrong, but we have blurred what that is by our own conduct. We found a 2-bedroom furnished apartment nearby that we have rented for 6 months, Faith explained. It's reasonable and close to the school we both teach in. We figure it's the first step in rebuilding our lives. It's time for us to stop living under Mom's influence and find out who we are without her. Hope and I will be moving in tomorrow since Mom is going to be busy with some political party thing, Faith added. When we saw you, we both realized we had to apologize to you because we were so wrong. Dad, you really had no choice but to do what you did. We see that now. If you had faced us directly, it would have been 4 against 1, Hope said. You knew we had to work through it in our own way. Sometimes you just have to allow things to work out on their own. I said you were already forgiven because I saw your behavior as being influenced by your mother, Kendra. I will forgive, but will never give her a second chance again. Her actions have always been self-centered and deliberate. With that said, I handed them my cell phone and asked them to add their contact information. They did and added my new number. What area is the phone number for? Hope asked. South Dakota, I said. OMG, you moved back to Grandpa's farm. Faith said with a huge smile. He would be so proud. You know the farm? Karen asked. Yes, Dad made sure the 3 of us spent every summer there growing up, Hope said. Until we started high school and developed the typical teenage attitude. We all learned to drive on Grandpa's tractor. Dad always drove us out and brought us back. He talked to us every night while we were there. We never heard from Mom the whole time we were gone. We learned that with her it was out of sight, out of mind. Faith said Grandma used to say Mom was the shallowest person she had ever known. So, Dad, why are you in town? Karen, can we get your cell phone number? Dinner turned out to be a bit of a celebration. The twins learned about the new house we were building and the reason I was in town. I learned that Karen had 2 daughters of her own, just a few years younger. While we were eating, Hope got a text from her older sister asking if they were doing okay. Hope texted back, having dinner with Dad and his girlfriend, Karen. Faith and I will stop by afterward to explain everything. We were walking the pier, taking a relaxing stroll, both kind of in awe of how things were slowly working themselves out. I'm surprised, Karen said. Moving away from them forced them to work most of it out on their own. My dad said, give a person enough rope and they will hang themselves. I said it's a true statement. It was their own conduct, pointed out by their own gender, that exposed what they really were. If I had been here, like the twins said, it would have been 4 against 1. This way, they were against themselves. Their own sense of honesty and morality, when faced with it, brought them down. Evil itself does not exist if it's not supported by someone carrying out the desires of others. Karen said, too many in our society blame the object, not themselves. In many ways, you were their object for the simple reason that you could not go along with what they did. I said because in my eyes, it would never be right. In Kendra's eyes, that was a sign of weakness to be used against you. Karen said, I see it as one of your enduring strengths because your conduct reinforces who you are. You could never be a snowflake, being carried by the whims and wishes of those with no morals. Your character is to the soul, and it shows by your conduct to all that you're able and willing to stand your ground. Kendra came home expecting to see her twin daughters. The political planning event this Saturday had taken longer than she had expected. She was going to suggest the 3 of them go out for the evening. She had thought about her last blow-up with them and realized she had gone too far. It had gotten particularly nasty because she saw some of their father's traits coming through, and she couldn't allow that. She had just thrown her purse on the counter to get a Coke out of the refrigerator when she saw the 2 house keys sitting on the counter on top of a short note. "We have moved out. We don't like what you helped us to become. Good luck with your life. We have blocked your number." It was signed by Faith and Hope. Damn Colin anyway. He walks out on me, stays away, files for divorce because she was getting a little comfort on the side. Everyone important in the circle she associated with, she knew, was doing what she had been caught doing. Why can't he get it? She should never have married a narrow-minded person like him because of his principles. He had destroyed her personal life. Carrie should know where they are, so she picked up the phone and called her. She had been pushed to the limit by a worthless person who had done nothing but walk away. Carrie answered on the 3rd ring. "Where in the hell are Hope and Faith?" Kra yelled into the phone in anger. "I haven't heard from them since Tuesday night when Dad had security throw them out from the Hampton," replied Carrie, wanting to feel her mother out. "Why did he have them thrown out?" Kra had to ask. "They wanted to give him their 2 cents worth on how badly he had treated you. They went after him like they were trying to cut him down. Dad said he had enough of this and called security. When they showed up, he told them that he was not willing to buy what they were trying to sell," Carrie said. Security escorted the 2 of them out the back door. Because of what they believe, Faith and Hope are banned forever because the Hampton doesn't want high-class escorts working their hotel. But they're not escorts. "You and I know that," Kra said, showing some concern. "When they showed up here in tears, they told me their story. Do you want to know what I said to the 2 of them?" "Mother," Carrie said. "Seriously, yes, perhaps I do." Kra said, "I told them that when their friends were treating them nicely, weren't they in fact being compensated for it in advance?" Carrie explained. Carrie laughed because her mother's phone went dead. Kra was lost in her tears. Her statement had hit her in her soul. She knew instantly that she could never speak to her husband Colin again directly. She could never allow herself to be alone with him ever. What Carrie had said straightforwardly was her father's truth. Kra realized that as soon as she heard it, Colin, without saying a word directly to any of them, had destroyed them all. No one who had a bit of honesty in them could argue that simple comment because everyone who heard it would recognize it for what it was. A simple, direct, unbiased fact. All those weekends away with her friends that had seemed like adventures were, in fact, just a way of paying for her lifestyle. Colin had refused to embellish the raw truth. It had taken her 12 weeks to understand what he had said on the video the night she had returned from Vancouver. By her actions, she had turned her twins into what she had become in his eyes, a reflection of the choices she made. No man could accept that. No wonder he walked away from all of them. By her own actions, she had left him no choice. She had never seen it from his side until this moment. If his truth came out publicly, she would be destroyed, and he knew it. By walking away, he had left her something she hadn't left him, her dignity. She had not only compromised herself, but had also brought her whole family down with her. Like so many, she had taken her progressive lifestyle to the extreme. She no longer had a relationship with her husband or her daughters because she could never admit that truth about her choices to any of them. It wasn't the progressive way to admit responsibility or to be completely honest. For the first time in her life, she had no scapegoat to blame. This one was on her. Kinda looked around at the house, realizing that if she was going to move on and get over what she had done, she had to sell the house that held so many memories. There were just too many reminders here of what she had thrown away. The reality of facing the truth was difficult. She would use the excuse that it was just too big for her, and everyone would believe it. Eric Hopper would be pleased to learn what had happened because, until now, he had thought she had gotten off lucky. She would be like him, totally alone. Karen and I had come back to her house after an evening of drinking and dancing. We had fallen asleep together on the couch. Meadow and Amber took advantage of it, using Karen's cell phone to send pictures to my 2 youngest daughters, who called back. Between the 4 of them, they started planning what to do. One of her daughters got a blanket and threw it over us. I awoke to a vision of a sleeping angel in my arms. My cell phone showed it was after 7 a.m. We had gotten about an hour of sleep. Meadow was already up, just sitting in the chair watching us. I guess I will have to get used to seeing this on a regular basis, Meadow said with a smile. Mom looks so happy and content. I'll go start making coffee for all of us. About an hour later, the four of us were sitting around relaxing and talking at the kitchen table when the girls sprang the news on us. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, my side of the family would be arriving for the first family get-together. Karen and I ran to check the fuel needed for the grill. It was good while she got redressed after making the grocery list. Out we went to my suite so I could have a quick shower and shave. After getting dressed, we headed to a local grocery store. Just as we were going in, we ran into Kendra as she was coming out. She paused right in front of me. "Colin, please let the girls know I'm selling the house," kinda said. "If they want anything, Carrie still has a key. Since they're no longer speaking to me, they can take what they want while I'm working. The same goes for you. I'll pass on the message and give Karen power of attorney to act on my behalf," I said. "As for me, I took what I wanted when I left. I'm only in town again for another 6 days." She nodded and walked away. We continued in, loading the vehicle up with groceries we bought, before discussing our awkward meeting with Kendra. "Something serious has happened in Kendra's life that we don't know about," I said. "Kendra seemed out of it today." "Do you think the twins moving out might have caused that?" Karen asked. "No, she was used to it being just us," I replied. "Something else must have happened that sent her a message she's trying to sort out or come to terms with. She loves that house, so whatever happened must have taken her by surprise and impacted her in some way." During the barbecue, Karen and I learned what the twins had written to their mother and what Carrie had said afterward. All 5 of our daughters got along great. David and I, for the most part, stood on the sidelines while the 5 females interacted. Amber and Meadow doted over little Colin. I told my 3 daughters about what their mother had said to us at the grocery store. David said he wanted the huge plasma TV. Carrie just rolled her eyes. I chuckled to myself. Our first family get-together could not have turned out any better. After my daughters left for their respective places and helped with the cleanup, Dawn, we relaxed with a cold beer. So basically, if we got it right, Faith and Hope have ended their relationship for now with their mother because they want to find out what kind of people they are without their mother's influence, Amber said. "Why would they do that?" Karen asked. "They followed their mother's example and got caught up with the concept of having what they called friends with benefits. It cost them both their first marriages. It took my leaving Kendra for them to begin to see their own situation in a new light. I said last Tuesday they confronted me because of my conduct towards their mom. I ended up throwing them out later that night in a heated discussion with their older sister, Carrie. She said that when their friends with benefits were taking them out and treating them, weren't they, in fact, being compensated for their attention in advance?" Amber was in total shock. "Amber and Meadow, your mother and I were taught when we were very young that it was not important how we view ourselves in the world. What was important was how the world saw us," I said. "Every individual will see what you do or say in a different way. It taught us that our own conduct said more about us than anything we could ever say." "That's right. I couldn't have explained it any better," Karen said as she leaned against me. "That's why your father's conduct raised so many questions. It contradicted everything he ever said. As a result, the twins have decided to remove their mother's influence from their lives for now until they discover for themselves who and what they are. In order to do that, they had to take responsibility for what they did." I explained, "I'm very proud of them for that. For them, the healing will have started because they were honest enough about their own conduct." I guess our words hit home because, for a few minutes, the sound of silence was deafening. Then Amber said, "You're going to make a great dad, Dad." Karen lost it. The rest of the week went by quietly. Karen and I spent as much of our spare time together as possible. The new tractor passed with flying colors. The president was ecstatic. I had given the tractor its name. I called it Beta. The family decided on a gathering before I left. I noticed that the twins were getting closer to Karen's daughters. We couldn't pry little Colin from Karen's hands. The mothering instinct in her was still strong. Eric and Karen finally came to an agreement on the asset split when she offered him the house if he wanted it. He went for it, figuring it was his chance to get his daughters back into his life. Karen saw me board the plane as I headed home. It was the last week of August. The homestead was ready, the old torn down, the new one built, the barn improved where needed, and even the yard had been cleaned up. The last thing I had done was rebuild the driveway into the house and the barn. Uncle John had driven me to the airport because I would be driving a haul back. Karen had sold her practice, and an associate was going to finalize the divorces early in September. Over the last month, there had been multiple deliveries to the farm. Uncle John had been a great help setting up the new furniture and hauling what we no longer needed from Mom and Dad's household stuff to Goodwill if he couldn't find someone who could use it. It was nice to see neighbors helping neighbors again. Karen met me at the airport that Friday afternoon around 6 with the biggest smile I'd ever seen in my life. Amber and Meadow were there with her. After taking her into my arms and giving her a long overdue kiss, I stepped back, got down on one knee, and officially proposed to the delight of both her daughters. They both captured a video of it all, which included me sliding the ring on her finger. Amber and Meadow, having been in on my surprise, had arranged a huge celebration dinner in a restaurant that featured dining and dancing with all our daughters and David in attendance. Between David and me, the ladies kept us on the dance floor most of the evening. When we got to Karen's home, Meadow told us to wait in the car for a moment. Amber and she ran in and right out, carrying a large overnight bag filled for her mother. "Mom, Dad, we booked you a suite at the Hampton Inn for the weekend. We don't want to see the two of you until Monday," Amber said. When we got to our suite, we found a huge basket filled with 2 bottles of champagne, chocolates, strawberries, 2 glasses, balloons, and roses. The card said, "Congrats from your 5 daughters." I don't think we left the suite for the weekend. After a wonderful breakfast Monday morning, we went to pick up the U-Haul. The one we picked up was bigger than I expected. I asked about it, but all Karen said was that I'd have to wait until this afternoon when it would be revealed. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, Faith and Hope showed up and broke the news. They were moving east. It seems when they learned that I had moved back to my father's farm, they had begun applying around the area in which I would be living. They both had been hired by the Vermilion School Board. Karen had given them some furniture, and we would be hauling what they got out of their mother's house and into a rental storage unit through a real estate agent. They had rented a 3-bedroom house. That way when the weather got bad, Amber could stay in town with them. I dropped the suit against Eric Hopper as he agreed to cover all my court costs in Vancouver. We received our divorce certificates at the end of September. On the last Saturday in October, Karen and I exchanged our vows in front of the entire blended family. Carrie and David had flown out with little Colin so they could attend. It was Karen who gave me the ultimate surprise in front of everybody. To my darling husband Colin and our family, I wish to inform you all that there will be a new addition coming into the world sometime in May. Our doctor has informed me it's a boy. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share,